You're listening to episode number 71 of the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. In this episode, I talk about how to uplevel the be do have model using identity transformation. What that means in plain English is how to actually get more of what you want in life very easily. Okay, stay tuned. Hi, I'm Jim Fortin, and you're about to start transforming your life from the inside out with this podcast. I'm widely considered the leader in subconscious transformation, and I've coached super achievers all around the world for over 25 years. Here, you're going to find no rah-rah motivation and no hype, because this podcast is a combination of brain science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom all rolled into one to take your life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting a lot more in life, to feel better, to heal, to have peace of mind, to feel powerful and alive, and to bring more abundance and prosperity into your life, then this podcast is for you, because you're going to start learning how to master your mind and evolve your consciousness. And when you do that, anything you want then becomes possible for you. I'm glad you're here. Holy cow, so episode number 71. Wow, I was just thinking as I was saying that, how quickly time flies. And, I tell people that the phrase that I use is that we go to bed at 25 and we wake up at 50. I mean, time just flies. Anyway, this week's topic obviously was how to uplevel the be do have model using identity transformation. All right, let's do this first. I want to go back into here very quickly the be do have model. I'm sure you've heard me talk about it before. I'm pretty sure. The be do have model is how I do everything, all of my programs where I work from, everything starts with be do have. Now, what that is most people work backwards. And I'm going to tell you, I was one of those people. Most people work from what I call have do be. And the have to be model is if I have or I had something, then I could do something. And if I could do something, then I could be successful. For example, if I have or I had time or money to join the gym or to hire a trainer or to buy, organic food or whatever, if I had the money, then I could do these things. And if I could do these things, then I would be fit. Well, that's a broken model. Anytime you say, I don't have enough time, energy, or money. And, I've said this before, and I want to say it again because it's so profound, yet we miss it. And it's very, very simple. And you might be sitting there thinking, well, okay, I don't fall into that category, but probably you do because most humans do. Doesn't matter if you've got $1 billion in the bank or what. So most people fall because you might not fall into this category with your money, but I've seen people have a lot of money, but obviously not working the be do have model in their personal life, in different areas of their life. So the have do be model is the one that pretty much most people work by. And as I've said before, I used to work by that very same model. I used to think, well, if I had more money, then I could do this to build my business. And then when I do this, I will be successful. I'm going to share with you I want you to take a look at your life and really get out of self-deception and just be honest with yourself. If you're working from I don't have enough time, I don't have enough energy, or I don't have enough money, that is have to be. And what I want to share with you is nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change because you're working from a broken strategy. Okay, the reverse model that we're talking about and we want to up-level is the be do have model. And that model is who do I have to be to do the things that I choose to do or need to do or want to do to have the outcomes that I want. So let's talk about money for a second. And the reason I talk about money is because, you might have heard me say before, reading a Wall Street Journal article, is that 78% of Americans work paycheck to paycheck. I know people that make $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 a year, and they're still struggling on that. Money is such a huge issue for I don't know, I would say at least 90% of the population, even in the first world countries, so many people struggle with money. But here's where people work backwards. People will say things, if I had more time or more money so that I could hire a project manager or do Facebook ads or hire a web designer or hire somebody to do all these things, then guess what? I could be successful and I could be somebody who's wealthy. Broken model. The model we have to work from is be do have. Who do I have to be? meaning what ways do I need to be? And I want to share with you some universal ways that we can be that is challenging for a lot of people. Universal ways to be is to be courageous. But so many times we actually want to work from have to be because we're not courageous. So a very powerful, powerful way to be is to be courageous. As a matter of fact, pretty much anything that you want in life is on the other side of fear. Now, you might have seen bumper stickers before, and there's a bumper sticker that says no fear. Well, fear is also hardwired into the reptilian part of the brain. And guess what? When people say no fear, it takes courage to get through fear. Okay, so the title of this episode is How to Uplevel, Be, Do, Have. The first place I want to start is this. Now let's say that you're already familiar by listening to my episode, the podcast and everything, and let's say that you're already familiar with the be, do, have model, thinking about, who you have to be to do what you have to do to have what you want. But I want to actually throw a curveball at you here so we can start up-leveling the be, do, have model. And that curveball is this. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, who is the being? Who is the being working through the be, do, have model? Now, one of my coaches used to say, and I love this phrase, one of my coaches used to say is that your doing, meaning whatever you do, your doing is only as effective as the being doing the doing. So I ask you, if you're air quote doing and you're working through the be, do, have model, who is the being doing the doing in the be, do, have model? This is a blind spot for a lot of people. Most people, and I say most, been there myself in the past, most people actually devour. When they hear the be, do, have model, they're like, well, yeah, this makes perfect sense to me. But they're working the be, do, have model from a stuck identity, which means the be, do, have, meaning even wanting to be someone different so you can do different things and have different things, is only as effective as the current identity that you currently have. So let me give you an example of that. Right now, I want you to think about some amazing things that are currently out of your reach, but I want you to think about some amazing things. Let's say, for example, well, let me give you some examples. Let's say that you live in a $300,000 home. I want you to think about for a moment having a $3 million home. Let's say that you drive a Chevy Citation. I mean, I don't even know if they make those anymore, but I want you to consider for a moment that you were buying a brand new $500,000 Rolls Royce. Now, what happens here is a part of you is like, yeah, it really would be nice to have that. And then another part of you is like, are you kidding me? There's no way you can have that. You know what? Nice dreaming, whatever, you're not going to have that. Well, what I want to point out is even though you might want to say things like, well, who would I have to be to have that house? Notice what happens automatically as the reptilian brain kicks in. And actually, what happens here is you're working from the old identity, trying to create a new identity. And when we work from an old identity, we're working from our past. And when we work from our past, we repeat our past. Something that I tell people in my coaching programs, and again, when I say this, I'm going to just say it, is that it's very challenging for a lot of us to get our minds around a lot of things. But something one of my coaches taught me years ago is that you cannot create from your past. Consider that. You cannot create from your past. You can only create from now. But what a lot of us do is we create from our past, and our past is our old identity. Now, let me give you an example of that. Let's say let me give you a real life example that I see a lot. People will say things like, oh, okay, and by the way, I don't know when you're going to listen to this. It could be 2 years from now. I don't know. But we're about to roll into 2020. And people could say, okay, I made $100,000 in 2019. Yeah. I have a good idea here. I'm gonna make $120,000 in 2020. Well, the thing is this: when people do that, and probably most of you listening to this, you have done that. And when you do that, you're working from your past. You're working from your old identity. And when you work from your old identity, you pretty much just recreate your old identity over and over and over again. Now, I want to go into this a little deeper, but before I do, I also want to mention habits here. And I've got multiple episodes here on habits, and in particular, the reptilian part of the brain and how it maintains our habits. Well, Many people fail, even though it analytically makes sense, the be do have model. Many people fail, and the reason why is because their habits, they've got an old identity that they stay in the habit of, which is brain based, and they're quite literally working from their entire identity. And this is not analytical left brain, this is actually the reptilian part of the brain. That's why I say that our habits are so vital. And you've heard me say before that we don't get what we want or what we think we want, we get our habits. This is why, for example, we could say, I want that $400,000 house and I want to hit my goals or, whatever it is for you. And we don't do it. And the reason that we don't do it is because our old habits are coming from the old identity, and everything is identity. Everything is identity. You don't get in life what you want, you get your habits, and your habits come from your identity. So hopefully that sinks in for you guys as I continue with this particular episode. Hopefully you're starting to really get, and I say this with a lot of compassion because I've been there myself in my own life. Many times we have to hear things many times or in many different ways or in a different way for us to go click, aha, yes, I got it. So we're talking about identity in this episode, and we also want to talk about up leveling your identity, which I'll give you some food for thought for that in just a minute. Okay, so I want to talk about the brain here just a little bit, and I want to talk about identity a little more. Now, if you've been in coaching with me or in any of my programs, or you're a member of my membership site or any of that, you may be familiar with what I'm going to share, but the majority of people have never heard what I'm going to share with you right now. I am an ardent student of personal transformation, and I have read everything from the most boring textbooks in the world. I consume like voluminous amounts of behavioral research, anything having to do with transformation, the brain, the mind, everything from, behavioral psychology and all this kind of stuff to even the more advanced stuff about energy and brain and all this kind of stuff. I have a book, and I don't know where it is anymore, but it was some very obscure research from the 1970s at the University of Texas. And there was a couple of things in this book, and this book was about identity. There was a couple of things in there that I want to share with you that when you hear these and you look at your life, these may be some major ahas for you relative to shifting your identity. So even though the be do have model sounds good to people and it makes sense to people, many times they have a hard time executing and following through. So let me give you two reasons that are brain-based research that demonstrates this. Number one is the concept of predictability. This is brain-based. Our brains, the reptilian part of the brain, not the analytical prefrontal cortex, but the reptilian part of the brain literally operates, and it's a survival mechanism on predictability. Now, the reason that it does this is because many thousands of years ago, when we were, hunters and gatherers, if we were going to leave the cave and hunt for food, we wanted to be able to predict what is my likelihood of making it back to the cave again. It's a survival mechanism. So I want you to know that many times people don't want to shift their identity, even though they like be do have, and they think about who do I have to be. They don't want to shift that because they can't predict if they let go of part of their identity now, who are they going to be tomorrow or what's going to happen tomorrow. Secondly, this is a big one. I mean, this is massive. You ever noticed before that many times when you're wanting to create change in your life and you start getting some momentum very quickly, like maybe 2 or 3 weeks in, boom, it's like a rubber band and it snaps back and it pulls you backwards. And you're like, what the heck, what happened? I was making all this progress and all this momentum, and now I get pulled backwards. What's happening? That also comes from the reptilian part of the brain. So before I tell you what it is, let me ask you, how many times have you wanted to create change in your life and you start getting anxious about the change? You're like, I don't know, I'm really uncomfortable about this, and I'm starting to feel really weird about this, and why am I anxious about this? Well, that's called disintegration anxiety. And what that means is when part of the identity starts to disintegrate, what happens is we get anxiety about that. Why? Because we can't predict what's going to happen. So what happens for a lot of people, this is why change is really hard. What happens for a lot of people is they start to get change in their life and they get anxious about it. And anxiety is pain for people. So because we want to avoid anxiety and we want to lessen it, what we do is we retreat back to our old ways and we stop changing. Why? Because what happens is when we do that, the reptilian brain kind of does this. And just relaxes and removes the anxiety. So therefore you have no further anxiety. Why? because you've stopped trying to change, and now the brain, the reptilian part of the brain, air quote, feels safe because see, that part of the brain doesn't want you to change because that part of the brain is responsible for your survival. There's much more to it that I could go into, but I'd rather refer you back to one of the earlier episodes. I think it's episode 5 or so when I talk about habits. So as you can see here, and what's obvious, even though you like, and the be do have model makes a lot of sense to you, for a lot of people, I don't know anyone, I've never talked to anyone and they're like, wow, that doesn't make any sense. But you can see here, and as I said, it's obvious that you want to execute on the be do have model, but you wonder why you're not doing it and you fall back into your old behaviors and you never solidify the new identity. Well, here's a couple of reasons why. Also, be do have. And any one of my programs always, they know that I even capitalize the word be when I'm talking about being, is a major strategy faux pas. It doesn't work. And when I use the word strategy, a strategy is what I call a mental sequence of steps to get to an outcome, is that most people try to change into someone else. Obviously, many of us want to grow and progress, and we want a new identity so we can do new things to have more things. But here's the kicker. Here's like the universal, just the cosmic joke, is that we're blinded because we're trying to change who we are from who we are. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me give you an example here. Einstein said that a problem can never be solved at the level it was created. Meaning, if you're the one who created all these air quote problems in your life, how do you expect to create something different? If you had different resources, you would create something different, but you don't have those resources. Therefore, you keep creating the same thing over and over and over again. So, as I said, many people try to create from their past and they try to create a new identity from who they are. That's why they keep recreating their identity over and over and over again. Let me give you another example here. Let's say you're in a box, and you are, metaphorically, we all are, virtually. Your self-image is like a box. It's a context. It's a framework. But let's say that you're in a box, and you're like, well, Jim, how do I get out of this box? And I say, easy. If you want to get out of that box, the instructions to get out of that box are on the outside of the box. And the only way you can read the instructions to get out of the box is to get out of the box, even though it might scare the hell out of you, is to get out of the box to read the instructions. And again, that creates anxiety and fear in people. So most people will say, nope, I'm going to stay inside the box because it is safe in here. So the point is that your current identity, quite literally, and this is also brain-based and psychological because identity can be brain-based in habit and your thoughts about who you are, but the current identity prevents the new identity. So again, you can try to use the be do have model all day long, but if you're not being the kind of person who can actually use the be do have model, which means stepping out of your old identity, then there's no way you can up-level the be do have model. Okay, so I have some questions for you and things that I just want you to ponder. So the first question would be this. What is the current identity of the person wanting to create transformation? And that pertains to you. So ask yourself, who is this person wanting to create transformation in their life? That's the first question I want you to ponder. And I want you to take some time and just sit with that and ponder that question. I don't know if I said it on this podcast or I said it on another, or I don't know. But everything you want is on the other side of resistance. And resistance is the number one obstacle that keeps you from everything that you want. And resistance is things like fear and doubt. So another question that I have for you is, and I want you to take some time with this and be honest with yourself, as you think about identity transformation, what resistance comes up for you when you think about identity transformation? Big question to ponder. Now, something that's just popped in my mind just now, I want to share something with you, and it might be completely off topic. I don't know. I can maybe weave it back in. We'll see. But I want to make it a lot easier for you guys to change. And I'm sure you know by this point that I talk about subconscious transformation, which I'll talk about here in just a moment. I talk about subconscious transformation and the way that we do, and identity transformation, and the way that we do that is we reprogram our subconscious minds. Now, I'm not going to teach that here on the podcast. I have an entire program on one of my websites, my membership site, but I think it's episode number 5 here where I talk about a book that I recommend, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. And I talk, I tell people just go read that book because, geez, I could create an entire program and write a whole new book and all that, but why? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to try to reinvent the wheel again. It's a really good book. But what I want to share with you and what I want you to look at is how much resistance comes up for you. And now let me take the thought where I was going to take it, is doing hypnosis for a lot of years and creating a lot of change and transformation in my life. Let me share something with you. There are times that I've wanted to create new things. And what I would encounter is this, in air quote, invisible subconscious resistance. Meaning when I would do my subconscious reprogramming, this little like Tasmanian devil would show up and like sabotage everything that I'm doing. And then what would happen is I would actually become more forceful and I would say things like, no, I am reprogramming my subconscious mind. I am wealthy. Now, I wasn't saying it like that, but I was doing it in hypnosis, in self-hypnosis. And it dawned on me one day. This is what I want to share. It doesn't happen a whole lot anymore, but what I've discovered works really well, and everyone that I've shared it with has told me that it works really well for them. When you may be trying to reprogram a new identity and you get resistance and you're like, what, why? Where's this resistance coming from? Go away. And I think a lot of you can relate to that. So the resistance is probably counter to what it is that you want to create. And then the more you focus on what it is that you want to create, the louder the resistance gets. So what I discovered many years ago is when I stopped fighting the resistance and I started allowing what I want, all the resistance goes away. So for example, let me give you an example of money. Let's say that I'd be subconsciously reprogramming myself for money. And I'd have this Tasmanian devil come in into my self-hypnosis and just sabotage, maybe saying things like an inner critic voice. You can't have that. Who do you think you are? You grew up poor. Well, then what would happen is I'd start fighting back in self-hypnosis. And what I learned is when I simply just shifted and I said, I allow myself to be wealthy. I allow myself to attract money into my life, or whatever it might be for you. I think you're already following along here and you get what I mean. But when I shifted from the resistance and fighting the resistance to allowing, then things shifted. So to bring it back to this episode, if you're having any challenges shifting your identity so that we can uplevel the Be Do Have model, maybe an approach would be this. I allow myself to shift my identity to XYZ, or I allow myself to shift my identity to be more powerful or more courageous or whatever it might be for you. And I think when you do that, you're going to find that all the resistance and all this Tasmanian devil stuff and the inner critic voice and all that, it goes away when you work from allowance versus trying to force something to happen in your life. Okay, so another question for you would be this as well, is what would be the identity of a person who changes things in their life very, very quickly? Now, we can play with this question in a couple of different ways. See, most of you guys think that change is hard. I'm telling you, I've seen it for many years. Most people think that if you want to change your life, man, you got to dig in and you got to get a therapy for all these years, et cetera, when change is quite literally very easy. Change is simply nothing more than shifting your thinking and shifting it repetitively. Anytime that you go up to a stoplight and you say, you know what, I'm going to turn left at this stoplight. At any given moment, you can change your mind and say, no, I'm going to go right at this stoplight. Or you know what? No, I'm going to park my car at this stoplight. Or no, I'm going to back up and make a U-turn. I don't know, back up and then, do something else and go right or left or whatever. Change is very easy. But the question I have for you is, what is your identity? Here we go. I'm concretizing it now. Here's where I want to go. What is your identity about change and transformation when it comes to changing your identity? So if your identity is that it's hard to transform my identity, then guess what? That's going to be your outcome. Okay, so this entire topic was about up-leveling using identity transformation. So let's go back there and let me tie this together. So what you want to look at is, what is the identity of the person who wants to create identity transformation? And then again, what is your identity about being able to subconsciously reprogram yourself? If you have no idea what I'm talking about with subconscious reprogramming, go to episode, again, I believe it's number 5 or so, and it's an entire episode on subconscious reprogramming. Okay, so transformational takeaways. Now, the takeaways are this. Number one, and I've said it, and I say it quite often. Number one, and this is so simple that we miss it. Seriously. Number one is you are where your attention is. And I know you've heard me say that. I am where my attention is. If you have $1 million in the bank, guess where your attention is. If you're dead broke, guess where your attention is. Because your external world will always reflect your internal world of attention. We must learn to master our attention. And if you haven't heard me say it before, please write it down. And really, really, don't just understand it, but come to know it. I am where my attention is. And so another part of this transformational takeaway could be, and I've said this in another episode before, I heard this many years ago from a motivational speaker, and it is spot on. I think George Bernard Shaw said, some people see the world as it is and say, why? I see the world as it can be, and I say, why not? And what this motivational speaker said is do not see things as they are. See things as you want them to be. Do not see things as they are. See things as you want them to be. Now, when you see things as you want them to be, that's where your attention is. Now, relative to your subconscious identity, what do you want it to be? When you focus on all the things you can't have and all the resistance, you're not working from now. You're working from the past. When you work from the past, you recreate every bit of that. So, to uplevel the be-do-have model, plain and simple, you want to look at the person doing the be-do-have model. You want to get outside of the box, to read the instructions on the outside of the box about how to get out of the box. Okay, real quick here, I want to say again, obviously we have a pre-recorded outro here, and I just want to say thank you so much for all of you that share and you download and you comment and you post on Instagram and everything else to help your friends and your family. I just want to say again, a heartfelt thank you so much for listening and allowing me to serve. Okay, the next episode is a Q&A episode, and the question's pretty simple, and of course I'll read what the person wrote to me, but the question is this: how do I have peace and not live in fear? How do I have peace and not live in fear? Okay, so if that resonates with you and you hear that and you're like, that speaks to me, I will catch you over on the next episode. Okay, stay well, make it a great day today, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this entire podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with your friends and family. You know, if you found value, they will too. So please share via your social media channels. Also, if you have questions, I'm here to assist. You can email me questions to support@jimfortin.com, and I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. Also, if you want transformational content like this daily, connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram name is I am Jim Fortin. Finally, I do have a personal request. I believe that we're all here to help others and to grow and evolve ourselves. Together, you and I, let's help more people. If you would please leave a review on iTunes, and a good one by the way. I'd be grateful, and through your assistance together, we can transform more lives. Thanks for listening.